I don't know. Apparently my sister, she needs us to watch her kid, me and my husband, so she can go out of state to go and get a new job. Well, my husband is acting so weird about it. He's like, "Oh, this isn't our responsibility. We just learned about this yesterday. We didn't plan to do this. You need to send him back." It was really weird because he's always wanted a child, so I thought this would be a good practice run. However, I must have been really wrong, because the next thing out of his mouth was absolutely disgusting what he said to that little kid. "I'm 32. I'm just confused as to why my husband's so upset, because I agreed to take care of my nephew, Paul. He had refused to say anything of substance to me, and I'm exasperated at the point that I can't help but feel that he's keeping something from me. It's aching my married life, and I'm determined to get to the bottom of his irrational behavior. But I'm not sure if it's entirely wise anymore. I just might, I don't know, think about what I'm not interested in discovering, or in my marriage, myself, because I'm being too nosy and disgusted of my husband. I've been married for 6 years now, and in those 6 years I've learned that I would never be able to have children of my own, after having 2 miscarriages in a row. I didn't know the news like that would be the cause of my near downfall, and I'd spiraled into the worst depression I'd ever known. I kept drinking. I didn't think that there was a point to live. It's not even that I was so big on being a mother. It's just one of those things that you learn to accept and eventually expect to have. It's mainly because Christopher had always wanted children. It was something that he had talked about so many times before we had gotten married. I love him, and was so eager to be a part of his dream, only for everything to go downhill with one visit to the hospital. I had even thought that he would want a divorce, but he was there and took care of me during my worst moments. In return, I'd gotten back on my feet, and after a year, I was a better version of my former self. I made more money, I made a whole lot more, working virtually, and when my husband lost his job, we discussed and I decided to be the breadwinner. A part of me did not mind, because then Christopher would have a reason to keep me around, plus it could make up for not being able to give him one of the things he wanted. He doesn't know this, of course, and I don't see myself telling him that anytime soon. It's another reason why I'm surprised by his reaction. For somebody who wants kids so much, it's very odd, honestly. I thought that he would have been happy to have our nephew over, but when he returned from work and saw Paul, he asked who he was. Then told me to go ahead and call my sister to take him home, since we'd made no preparation for him. It was a dumb excuse on his part, but he wasn't exactly wrong. Cynthia, my younger sister, had called me the night before, dropping Paul off, telling me that she had a major job opportunity out of state and did not know who to leave Paul with. I had to accept to help out. Besides, it wasn't like I didn't have any free time on my hand. Learning tech and working from my house was one of the biggest decisions I've ever made. And while I wasn't very keen on having a child disrupt my schedule, I was ready to tackle the challenge. Paul is a well-behaved kid, and sometimes it's almost like he's not around. If not TV, then books at his tablet keep him so occupied, and he mostly calls for me when he needs my help. He was raised well, but not by my sister, my late aunt, with whom she stayed with at the time. You see, my sister is not the best-behaved person out there, and tends to make mistakes as a person. When we were younger, we fought a lot because she was simply egotistic and acted like an irrational human being, always picking the best out of the options available, claiming that she was so far better than my friends despite being better in no way, being mean at every opportunity she gets, especially when anyone challenged her. She became better behaved when she got older, but she still made the funniest decisions, such as sleeping with so many people and not knowing who the father of her children were. I don't buy it, but I didn't bother asking why she didn't tell me who Paul's father was. Maybe it was for the best. And I did not want to be the reason for any negative emotions. The kid deserved a father, which is another reason why my husband's reaction is making me so mad. Paul has been there for over a week, and I can count the number of times Chris spoke with him on one hand. It wasn't him being mean, he just didn't want to be near the poor child, and I just hope Paul ends up forgetting all about this, given his age. If not, I won't easily forgive my husband. We've had quite a few arguments over the past few days, and they're all centered around Paul. At first, he was dismissive when I brought it up, but when I kept pushing him to go ahead and explain himself, he mentioned not wanting Cynthia's child in the house, and he and my sister were not on the best of terms, another thing I did not entirely understand because they've been pretty close before we got married. He wasn't a fan of her attitude, sure, but he was friendly enough to tolerate it. And for some reason, my sister did not know so much of her bad character when she was around him. At some point, all that changed, though, and Chris gets upset even at the mention of my sister's name. I guess she had managed to annoy him like she usually did others, so I had not said anything about it. However, it wasn't right to transfer that anger to her child. And after all the yelling, he had no plans to change his attitude, and I'd ignored him and taken care of Paul myself until I came home after visiting a friend of mine and Paul had been waiting outside. He looked like he had been crying and had been playing with the owner's pots of the other house. His tablet was beside him, but it was almost dead. Something I eventually found out when I questioned my husband and learned that the child was outside since I left for almost 4 hours. I lost my calm. I'd rather not talk about the argument because Chris left the house that night, stating that he was not going to stay nice since I refused to get Cynthia to take her stupid child back. Those were his words, and while the solution is quite simple, I can't bring myself to it. Paul is a sweetheart, and I don't think my sister will leave wherever she is just because Chris wants her to. I told her to get back as soon as possible to get her son because he really isn't our responsibility. Plus, I miss my hubby. He's traveling tomorrow, something about my in-laws having a problem. He didn't say much to me over the phone, and I don't know if asking would be crossing a boundary, since I'm not very close to them. I've called my mother as well because I want someone to talk some sense into my hubby since I failed. Even if Paul leaves now, the chances of us meeting him again are very high, and I won't have him behaving like a madman in public. Cynthia had stayed over at my aunt's during her college days and only came back to town to visit. And when I got married at the time, she's really just relocated, and while she's seeking job opportunities over at her college's town, there's a chance that she'll end up here. I don't know who has to talk to Chris, but as long as he behaves himself, I'm more than good. Update number 1. I'm almost sure that I'm overthinking things now and need to clear my head before I lose my mind. I can barely focus on my job anymore, and taking care of my nephew is starting to seem like a nightmare. Don't get me wrong, the boy isn't the problem and has done nothing to upset me ever since he got here 2 weeks ago. But taking care of him has come to its unwanted share of problem, and it's causing me to doubt myself, my relationship with people around me, and my sanity. Cynthia had profusely begged me to take care of her son, and she was very close to getting her job back. She had gotten a call for a nail interview and would be back in a few days to pick Paul up. She had even ordered to send me money if I needed any form of reimbursement for taking care of him. But I wasn't going to take anything. Not only was I perfectly capable of providing for and feeding another mouth, but I wasn't going to take from my own sister. This should be the best time that she's getting something tangible, and I'd feel horrible if I were the cause of all her effort and hard work going to waste, simply because my husband did not like her or her child. Speaking of Christopher, he's back in my house mainly because my mother spoke to him. I sincerely don't know what she told him, but he had at least come back. He does spend long hours at work and isolates himself in the room when he's home, though, but I've seen him make an effort to speak to Paul once or twice since he came back. It's better than no progress, and I can tell that with time, things will be better. I'm so glad I called my mom because she's one of those people who know how to fix a problem, either directly or indirectly. There's something that she said to me that's troubling me even now, among other things. I'm almost sure it means nothing because no matter how many times I think about it, it makes no sense. My mother had mentioned Paul having the same head shape and mouth as my husband. It's funny at the time till I started to wonder if that was the reason for Chris's behavior. My mother had not even said it seriously, but I spent a good amount of time staring at Paul. My mom wasn't wrong, but it was something that you would have to look at long and hard to confirm. Paul took after my sister so much it was uncanny, except for the bad behavior, of course. But when I remembered how badly my husband disliked my sister, I knew it wasn't possible. See, Cynthia wasn't even around often, and my husband had not gone on trips in a while. The one to see his family was a surprising occurrence. By the way, I think Chris lied about things going south in his family. I had called my brother-in-law Collins to ask what had happened to cause Chris to travel so quickly, and the man had been confused and asked what I had been talking about. It turned out that there had been no family emergency, so I wonder where he traveled to. Sooner or later, I'll ask him about all this, and I can only hope it's nothing to do with Paul. The major reason for this update, and the reason my mind has been in shambles, is that I've been getting messages from an unknown number, telling me about how Paul's going to ruin my marriage and whatnot. I won't lie, I thought it was Chris who sent the text. Then I got another one about Christopher keeping huge secrets from me, and I started to panic, because whoever is sending these knows my family well. I'm already suspicious of my husband. He isn't exactly making things better with his attitude, and how exactly is a 4-year-old going to ruin my marriage? I'd even remembered what my mother had said, and no matter how many times I dismiss the thought, it comes back. Do I confront my husband about his lie? Do you think that he may have had anything to do with Paul as a father? I don't know. Update number 2. You know, one of the reasons I wasn't very keen on confrontation was not because deep down within me I already knew the truth, but because I was too afraid of ruining another marriage, well, my marriage, altogether. I had almost done that with my depression and promised that nothing was ever going to take me away from Chris. But with what I've discovered in 1 week, I'm not too sure. I haven't said anything to anyone yet, and it's eating me up inside. Cynthia's back, by the way, and that means that Paul will be leaving soon. I hate that such a small child is the center of all this, and while I'm going to miss him, I really hope that I don't have to see him for some time after he leaves. My paranoia had gotten the better of me, and I'd gone ahead to have a DNA test done. And guess what? My own husband is the child's father. I didn't expect to be as shocked as I was, but no matter how many times I try to make it make sense, it really doesn't. Do you sleep with a woman that you claim to hate, or is it pretense? If it was my husband, is a better actor than I thought. I'm sure my mother already knows this and has used this to her advantage when speaking to my husband back then. It's not even that I'm upset with my husband for having a child behind my back. I always feel bad that he would not be a father because of me. But with my sister of all people, I'd at least told Chris that I had found out that he had lied to me about leaving for a family emergency. He had then confessed that he needed to take a break from the house to think, and when I asked if it was because of Paul, he had not said anything else. Confirming my suspicion, I had not mentioned knowing that Paul was his biological child, but I told him about the messages I've been receiving and even showed him a few of them. I'm not entirely sure whether the reason I did that was to confirm that he was not, responsible, or to be sure if he knew who was. In fact, responsible for the messages. He'd been shocked but told me that he'd get to the bottom of things. Fast forward to my present, where I have proof of him meeting up with Cynthia. I'd gotten someone to follow my husband twice, and the second time proved fruitful after, getting pictures of the duo together. It was, in short, one of the most painful things I'd ever seen, and I decided to give it a go and stalk my own husband in my paranoia. My mother was home and could not, she could take care of Paul, and she could not even care less where I went. I'd have to use my friend's car because of my fear of getting caught, and to be honest, I don't think Chris is cheating on me with my sister. He was entirely dismissive and kept shoving her away when she came close, which was a lot, and looked like he was angry with her. Despite all that, it wasn't very pleasant to watch. 2 people I cared about. In such a compromising situation, I left very, very quickly. Update number 3. Hey guys, get this. I called Cynthia to come over and get Paul because I'd fallen sick, and my mother was no longer with me. So she told me that she would support any decision I made when I asked why she hid the truth from me and not much else. That was the thing with my mom. She would never tell a soul anything unless it was a matter of life and death. I could be sure that she was going to keep the fact that I knew the truth away from my hubby and sister. Cynthia had come over in the evening, apologized, and sympathized with me due to my state of health, both of which had been fake as hell. That had not even bothered me, because as much as I cared for Cynthia, she was the kind of person I preferred to keep away for my sake. I don't know if telling her to come over when Chris was around was a mistake, but I needed to see their interaction up close. As expected, my husband had not given her the time of day, despite her annoying whines and attempts to make conversation, and at the time I had thought that I'd simply come out with the truth, stay away for some time, then come home and reconcile with my husband, because Paul's conception must have had a funny background story to it. But when I caught them kissing in the kitchen, when I was sick, and and meant to be in my bedroom, I was shattered. I still cry to this day when I think about it, though it was only a few days ago. I'm not sure what to think or do anymore. A part of me wants to justify my husband's actions, but I keep reminding myself that he has no excuse to be disloyal. I keep reminding myself not to justify his actions using my infertility. I keep reminding myself that he could have told me the truth if his, was with my own sister was unplanned, and I would have forgiven him no matter how long it took. Somehow I think he knows that I know something, with my withdrawal ever since I saw the scene in my kitchen. But he has not mentioned anything regarding it yet, and I feel like I'll explode soon. But you know what? Do I really care about that? Should I open my mouth and ruin everything I've struggled to build and keep these past 2 years? Am I overthinking again? Update number 4. I knew that it was only a matter of time before I could bear to keep the truth to myself. So while Chris left for work, I sent him a message, telling him I had something important to share with him that night. I sent one to Cynthia as well, except this time I told her I knew about the truth with her and Chris, and that she had won. I had not known her motive at the time, but now that I do, I don't blame her. Too bad her plans failed horribly after finding out the truth. My horrible sister had visited that evening as I was trying to get Chris to wait for his surprise. He was shocked to see my sister, which was the plan, and when he tried pushing her away again, I told him to stop because I knew that he was Paul's father. I told him that I was leaving the house with him, but that I didn't want to be with him anymore. And I realize now, as I said all those words, I meant them. I didn't think there would come a time when I'd want to leave my husband, but you never can tell the future, can ya? Cynthia's been shocked and asked what I meant by leaving the house for my husband, before telling me that she would not let me take half of his property simply because I want a divorce. I'd say Chris was too stunned to speak, but I watched in amusement as my sister talked about how well she was going to spend my hubby's money, because she and Paul were going to be with him as his new family. In fact, she gloated in my face, and it took so much of me not to burst out in laughter. Chris had almost ruined my fun by opening his mouth to explain things to her, but I beat him to the punch. Cynthia, her mouth dropped open, and it was not an exaggeration when I told her I own 90% of what's belonging to my husband and me. After explaining to her, she still didn't believe it, and asked Chris if I was lying to spite her. What my sister had failed to realize was that I was nothing like her. And when Chris had armed that I was telling the truth, she had slapped him across the face in anger. I'd been shell-shocked, but I didn't make a move, leaving them then and there, and Chris had run after me, but I have been in my car then, and, I was trying to force myself not to cry. I'm at my mother's place, the one place I know my husband won't come to. If, I'd been at a hotel, he would have waited outside just to see me. My mom will never tolerate such, and you know what? He knows that, and I don't know what'll happen next, and I'll be talking to a lawyer regarding my divorce soon. Final updates. Update number 5. Cynthia no longer lives with Chris, but Paul does. Last I heard, she ran away after realizing she could not survive on my ex-husband's less-than-average salary. It's not like she's living the life somewhere either. I'd been at her motel with some guy who was most likely a bum. If that's how she chooses to live her life, then, okay, that's okay with me. The woman really is one of the most shameless people I've ever had the misfortune of knowing and being related to. My mom's always so ashamed when neighbors and friends talk about Cynthia, and she almost hurt her when she came over to see me. It wasn't long after I left the house, about 2 weeks later or so. Cynthia had barged in, and my mother had let her in because she had asked me to. I was a wreck. I hadn't touched my computer or made any money. Had been speaking to a divorce lawyer, and my new reality felt like a nightmare then. She literally tried to talk to me to giving her money, since Paul was equally related to me, and I'd taken care of him for some time, and I'd say that was the only thing that I was upset about. The poor boy did not deserve this, and my aunt would be so upset if she were alive. But there was no way Cynthia was getting my money, especially not through blackmail. She would keep on doing it until I was fed up, so it was better to put an end to it before it even began. I'd also mentioned that I learned that Christopher had gotten her most of what she owed. He had confessed all this to me during a call when I'd asked if he ever had any feelings for my sister. Let's call it a moment of weakness when I thought I was being too rash and that he could not be forgiven. Christopher had told me everything, from how my sister had managed to seduce him when I was depressed years ago to how he kept sending money to take care of her and Paul. and how confused he was about his feelings. Naturally, she had gone ballistic, and my mother kicked her out. She'd given up, and my mother told me she left Paul with his father, who's currently struggling to get a better job. Cynthia herself no longer has a car, an apartment, or a source of income. I'm making this sound okay, but they're both miserable. My former neighbor keeps calling to ask what the problem is between me and my husband, saying he succumbed to alcohol like I had at the time. As much as I know I'm not meant to, I still do keep tabs on him, and when I saw him 5 days ago, he looked horrible. It's barely been 3 months, and he's changed for the worse. Paul will be taken into foster care at this rate. But I refuse to be cornered, about this. It's not my concern. Good riddance to both Chris and Cynthia. I'm working again, and I'm looking at places to live out of state. So I'll start something new, away from the terrible past.